Let's have you right there. Nice. Okay. You guys know what time it is if you are a channel veteran. It's debate review time. React Andy properties. Give me. Yes. Okay, thank you. Yes. Where's the timer? God dang it. There it is. Cool. Alright. So, I'm about to review a debate. This debate is about 40 minutes long. Apparently, this was hosted on the David Pakman show. He is a beta male, so I've heard. Friendship ended with him because of his shitty positions on Israel, I guess. I don't know. Average liberal commentator, I guess. And then Destiny, also a liberal live streamer. It does debate stuff, does research, does politics stuff, does all manner of things. And then Dennis Prager, right-wing crank, guy who made Dennis Prager University, PragerU. Not really a university, get owned, idiot. They debated. So why am I covering this? I know there's like, the blood sports factor is clearly there. It's a little bit dumb, but it's there. I also wanted to go and take a dive into, like, this is the state of the political discourse from the conservative end, right? Conservatives are, like, undebatable, basically. I mentioned in my RNC reaction that conservatives are barely intelligent enough to get themselves dressed in the morning and hold absolutely unhinged viewpoints. That sounds hyperbolic, but that's just real. And we'll probably see that reflected in this. I guess I want to examine the clash of ideology here between liberalism and fascism when they actually do clash, as opposed to, you know, when liberals like Macron sort of play right into the hands of fascists. And analyze that from a socialist lens. You guys probably know the game. I've been pretty open about my politics. Anyways, we have David Pakman, we have Destiny, 2 liberals, and 1 fascist, Dennis Prager, and 1 socialist, me, reviewing the debate. So let's get into it.
Today we have something exceedingly special, I would say. We are going to be speaking with Dennis Prager, host of the Dennis Prager Show. He's been on with me before, co-founder of PragerU. And
yes.
Also,
thank you, David Pakman. I just wanted to mention Dennis Prager does a lot of this. He's been on the Young Turks. He's been on David Pakman's show with just David Pakman. He's been on Destiny's stream. He does the online debates probably more than most conservatives. Probably. I don't know.
So Stephen Kenneth.
He's been around.
Bennell II. No.
That's true. David Pakman always calls Destiny by his full name, which is really funny, and then adds Destiny in there as well.
Some just as Destiny, known to some as Stephen, online streamer, gamer, political commentator. It's really great to have both of you on, and we've been working on this for a little bit, so many things have transpired since we kind of decided we were going to do this. So just to start somewhere.
Also, please no copyright Reno. I will try to make this a very heavily commentated debate. I'll try to offer my commentary where I can. I don't want a content steal.
And get the state of American politics right now. We had this assassination attempt against the former president, which, as I say, I am really glad did not succeed, because
Ooh, I mean, you know, no Fed posting, obviously, but it's kind of crazy. Nobody really cares about the assassination attempt anymore. Like, it's basically not an object of political discourse right now.
I want to defeat people with votes rather than bullets. That being said, Stephen, you've been criticized because you said you did not.
Assuming that votes and bullets are the only ways that political strife can be conducted, as opposed to through discourse, union action, mobilizing, etc. I'm sure he knows all that. I just wanted to highlight that this is, although I'm sure like David Pakman and Destiny are aware of the extra components of those other components of politics, a lot of people on the liberal portion of the spectrum do at times buy into the false dichotomy that it's either votes or bullets and you should only choose votes, right? Like, there is more to the game than just that.
Not feel, and I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, particular sympathy for what happened to Donald Trump. In part,
yes,
when
Destiny,
the victims have
ever the
been on
gamer.
the left, you do not feel that there has been sympathy equivalent to that from the right. Can you tell me if I'm...
Oh yeah, Destiny actually had a really based position on this when the assassination had happened, like a little bit when it was not that far in the rearview mirror, and he went on, I think it was like Piers Morgan or something. He explained really well why, like, nobody should really have sympathy for the right or for Donald Trump when shit like this happens, you know. For how much he is a lib, sometimes he does hit. He does hit sometimes.
If I'm correct in characterizing what you said, and maybe tell us what you feel now.
Yeah, I think that conservatives, especially under Donald Trump, have been responsible for increasing the hostility and the political divisions in this country in an unprecedented way over the past 8 years. I don't think that's just a byproduct of what Trump does. I think that's explicitly and specifically why people like Donald Trump.
That is indeed the feature.
People names. He's, he's boisterous. He's loud. He's angry. He represents what you really. He says what you want to hear. So if that side is going to engage in that on the rhetorical level, and then on the policy level, if you've got people who, attempt to coup the government, leading an insurrection on January 6th in order to circumvent the peaceful transfer of power, when violent things start happening, it's very hard to look at that side and go, my God, I feel so horrible that these things are happening, because this is like exactly where your rhetoric leads. Like, where else would it go to but this?
That's
what
true.
Do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, strong opening statement. And, conservatives love to cry the victim when they objectively have been, like, adding fuel to the fire the entire fucking time, And the best part is that, like, this was right-wing on right-wing violence. Like, the guy who tried to assassinate Donald Trump was a registered Republican, This wasn't some, like, crazy lefty plot where, like, I don't know, some anarchist decided to take a crack at it, This was a Republican trying to assassinate another Republican, and then the right decided to try to blame the left because fucking why exactly? I don't know. Yeah. Although, of course, it doesn't help that, like, the right wing is pursuing policies that further a crisis of material destitution and mental health ailments that would lead to people being insane enough to try to assassinate a former president in the first place, Another element of that.
So it's interesting. In preparing for this,
interesting.
I got to know Stephen a little better, and I watched him and Ben Shapiro for about 10, 15 minutes, and it was excellent. And one of the things that
that's a red flag. I would describe it as torturous, probably, if I watched a debate between Destiny and Ben Shapiro. That seems like a loss of brain cells waiting to happen because of the state of the online discourse with the right. But, sure, Dennis Prager. I mean, he's part of the online right, so he probably liked it for what Ben Shapiro was saying.
I think you, Stephen, noted was the staggering, I remember you used the word brain, but I don't remember the other term, about the staggering difference between left and right. And it's definitely one arena where you and I would agree that you believe that the hate-filled rhetoric and divisive rhetoric of this country is largely due to Donald Trump rather than to the left. Does
Wait, real?
For what I always say, and I have for 40 years on my radio show, I prefer clarity to agreement. We have great clarity in that you believe that. I think it is beyond belief that you believe that.
Oh.
If it weren't for Donald Trump, there would be just as much divisiveness in this country. When you call virtually everybody...
I have something to say about this, but I'll let him finish.
When you...
okay, he's going to the 2016
for the
line.
First time in American history.
Okay, yeah, here comes the playing the victim. I'm not terribly interested in entertaining that just yet. But it is interesting that Dennis Prager did say something that I kind of agree with, that I don't think is, like, mutually exclusive with Destiny's point either, right? Like, Destiny said that, like, yeah, Republicans and Donald Trump especially have been turning up the heat. Why should we feel any sympathy to them? I agree. Dennis Prager also said something that I agree with, that it's not Trump that is responsible for this necessarily. Now, obviously, his interest here is to abrogate all responsibility on the part of Donald Trump. Donald Trump, as a figurehead and leader in the Republican Party, obviously, and as the president since from 2017 to 2020, obviously bears a large part of the responsibility. He's at the head of the institution that is the Republican Party. But I'm under no delusion that he's the only Republican that would have been like that, basically. You know, I think the Republican Party, whether it was Trump or whether it was somebody else, they were going to go into much more fascistic leaning territory regardless. At about the same time, too, I think Trump just accelerated things a little bit, and he, I think, in some ways is extremely beneficial to the left for how quickly he killed the Republican Party. But regardless, it is true that Republicans have been turning up the heat nonstop, have been, trying to incite political violence against the Democrats, basically to try to bully them both in and outside of the halls of power. And it is also true that Trump is not the only person responsible for that. To argue as much would be to deny the role of the entire Republican Party, which obviously Destiny didn't argue, because I guarantee that he believes that the Republicans are also, as a party, responsible for that too. You know, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think I've heard him argue things to that effect before. And I think that was a constituent part of his argument in his opening statement. Now let's get to Dennis Prager playing the victim because somebody, I don't know, called the far right on being like crazy extremists who want to overthrow the government or something.
The leading candidate, when you arrest for the first time in American history,
yes,
candidate,
not inciting the political violence, but rather arresting a former president because they committed crimes.
The opposition party and a former president. When you paint the would-be president or a presidential candidate as the New Republic, one of the leading left-wing magazines does, as Hitler, and
well, he is very Hitler-esque.
Regularly, when the inaugural address of Joe Biden, easily the most.
Okay, he's probably going to say some shit about crowd sizes here. All right, two things. First, if you don't want your political candidate to be arrested, maybe your political candidate shouldn't be committing so many crimes. That's one thing. So a skill issue. But then also, if you don't want your political candidate to be compared to Hitler, maybe you shouldn't have a political candidate that acts so much like Hitler and believes all the things that Hitler believed, or advocates for all the things that, Hitler would have advocated for. So again, skill issue, two times, two-hit combo of having a skill issue,
Most divisive president in American history, spoke of white supremacy as a threat to America.
Which it is.
Meaning, obviously, those who vote for Donald Trump.
Why would you make the connection that Trump voters are who Biden was talking about when he said white supremacists, unless you are ceding the point that white supremacists vote for Trump, and Trump has ideas that are very amenable to the interests of white supremacists? I know Destiny's probably going to hammer in on that, but, the only reason you would say this is if you were interested in playing defense for white supremacy, because objectively, white supremacy is a very big threat to the stability of a lot of democracies in the West. Not just America, but, America being one of them. And ever since the Trump presidency, we've seen a lot of white supremacists be much more open about being white supremacists, the things they believe in, whatever. Need I mention the very fine people on both sides comment?
And then say Donald Trump is responsible. If Donald Trump had been assassinated, God forbid, and I would say God forbid about Joe Biden as well.
Okay.
There would be not one.
He wouldn't, but okay.
One diminution in the divisive rhetoric coming from the left. If Ron DeSantis were the nominee, he would be called.
Also, what divisive rhetoric coming from the left? All the left has been saying is that Trump is ideologically fascist and wants to destroy American democracy. Both claims that are true. Not a very divisive thing to say.
Old Hitler as well.
So Dennis, to be clear, you're saying you just disagree. You agree with Stephen that there is a difference in terms of violent rhetoric and incitement to violence from left and right, but you believe it is the left that has been inciting the violence, not the right.
Overwhelmingly.
Oh, okay. So he just basically his opening statement was like, "Oh yeah, you think the right wing in the United States incites a lot of violence? Well, actually, no. You take that, liberals.
Stephen?
All the intellect you can expect
It's
from
just
a
deeply
fascist."
unserious opinion. There's no way to like.
Okay,
actually
well, there you
engage
go.
with that. Donald Trump is literally known in the entire world as being the guy that makes fun of people. He literally is the guy that gives nicknames, divisive nicknames or derogatory nicknames to his political opponents. Sleepy Joe Biden, Crooked Hillary. What did he say about Ted Cruz's dad? Might have been the Zodiac. Like he just
That one was funny.
pocket things that, and then it's another world. I don't know if like conservatives listening actually believe this, but when people say things like, "Oh yeah, Joe Biden is so unbelievably divisive," really, Joe Biden, the guy that gets on stage and that we've seen like has trouble stringing together sentences. This is the insanely divisive president of fiery rhetoric. When he gets on stage and he's like, "MAGA Americans," and when I say MAGA, I don't mean everybody. I just mean the ones that deny the election. Right? This is the guy that's insanely divisive. But when Trump says things like, well, there was the Second Amendment. They're coming for that, and we can't do anything about it. Well, maybe the Second Amendment people, can, and everybody laughs. But when Joe Biden in a private meeting to donors says we need to put a bullseye on Donald Trump, like that's violent rhetoric. Give me a break. That's just
Well,
it's a
what
deeply
about that,
unserious
Dennis?
opinion.
I mean, what?
I think you should have talked a little bit about the fact that Donald Trump is like a fascist. I don't know how I feel immediately. Like, this is just first impressions, of course. I don't know how I feel about highlighting the fact that Trump gives like mean nicknames to people. I guess you could, certainly from the perspective of him being a divisive figure or whatever. Like, I guess that gets people with pearl clutch. So I don't know. Maybe it's a good argument. But certainly I think it's warranted to bring up, like, I think hammering in on Joe Biden saying, like, now I don't mean to lump everybody in with the same crowd here, even though I think Joe Biden actually should have. That's just me. And how Trump was, like, very consistent in saying, like, well, maybe our political opponents do need to get a little bit of the Second Amendment treatment or whatever he would say at rallies and stuff. I think that's definitely a strong argument for like, come on, dude. Because again, like Destiny said, like I said, this is the kind of shit you can expect from a conservative commentator. They're not serious. They're lying. They know they're lying.
But you mentioned the reference to white nationalism or white supremacy in Joe Biden's inauguration speech. But what else has Joe Biden done, in your view, to incite violence?
Oh, I didn't say he incited violence. I thought the issue.
Well, that's what he was arguing.
Who is more responsible for divisive? Also, Donald Trump is one man. Calling people Sleepy Joe,
lib shit,
or little Marco, is not in the same moral ballpark as calling people Nazis and depicting your opponent as New Republic in its last issue painted Donald Trump as Hitler. The staggering amount of lies. It's the whole left world. Donald Trump is one man.
This is again with the kind of whinging. This is an interesting overlap between fascists and liberals, is that they do the whole, oh, he's just one guy. Except from the perspective of the right, they're interested in saying, like, oh, well, Donald Trump's just a birthday boy, right? Like, doing that kind of thing. And then on the left, sometimes you get the, like, fascism in one man theory, where they sort of deny the role of the larger Republican Party. But then the whinging about fucking, what was it? He was talking about, dang it, I kind of have a brain fart. I'll have to rewind a little bit. What's that guy doing? No. Hey, shock dodge. Very nice. got owned. Alright. I think I'm in a good position as long as I don't hit any cars for the remainder of the race if I just drive this course, because it seems like everybody else is having some trouble on this course as well. Oh, poor bastard. Theoretically, I could have used that mushroom, but I don't know. I'm gonna use this. What the f- I threw that backwards. How did I get hit by my own fake item? Wacky. Damn it. That couldn't have been avoided. I drifted. He just bumped me into the car. Alright. Give me an item here. Alright, I'm gonna use this. Third? Cool. Alright, let's rewind to see my Stetsicus.
Did Donald Trump as Hitler?
Oh yeah, here we go. He's whining and whinging about the left calling Republicans, and Donald Trump particularly, Nazis and very Hitler-esque. Dog, if you want us to stop calling you Hitler, you should stop behaving like Hitler. You should stop, you know, presenting and advertising your legislative project where you're going to deport tens of millions of people. You should stop constantly fucking obsessing over trans people and trans kids especially. You know, that would be nice if you didn't do that. You know, it really skill issue. Again, if you didn't want us to call you Nazis, you should have stopped being Nazis.
The staggering amount of lies. It's the whole left world. Donald Trump is one man. The whole left is filled with hate. The lie.
Bit of projection, but all right.
Donald Trump said that there were fine people who were Nazis in Charlottesville.
He did say that. You can watch the clip.
All
right, this is one of the ways in which the fucking fact checkers are like fucking out to lunch or whatever the fuck. A lot of media outlets, I've explored this before, have a very pro Trump bias. Like, the media outlets want Trump to win. They just kind of have to be coy about it. The fact checkers are part of said media outlet, like, world, so they want Trump to win because it's good for their interests and whatever. You can, like, the fact checkers just straight up lied on this matter. You can go back and look for that news clip where Trump was doing a press conference in the wake of the Charlottesville rally. It's a pretty well-known news clip. He did, in fact, say that there were very fine people on both sides, specifically in reference to the neo-Nazis. You know? Like, basically, the reason Snopes put out that fucking dog shit fact check was specifically so that conservatives could do this bit, where it's like, see, even the fact checkers are saying he didn't do it. You know? What corporate capture does to a motherfucker.
He said it was false that he ever said that the Nazis in Charlottesville were fine people. He wasn't referring to them. The New York Times continues that lie to today. Joe Biden said that's the reason he ran for president, because of that horrific statement. The lying from the left and lying of smearing. This is not just Donald.
This is pearl clutching as hell.
Joe Biden. The left smears. That's what they do. When I spoke.
Okay, obviously everything that comes out of Dennis Prager's mouth is like transparently a load of garbage. But this is important to highlight because this is part of a fascist strategy that has been oft invoked before the days of Republican Party being openly fascist, when they were still mostly neocons, and some of them fascists, of course, is that they will disingenuously default to civility politics. That, like, oh my god, it's so uncouth and mean of the left to say these things, you know? Again, you don't want us to call you Nazis. Stop being Nazis.
Spoke at Arizona State University a year and a half ago. 34 professors of the 42 at the college that I spoke to at Arizona State said people should not attend because I am a bigot and a homophobe and an Islamophobe and a racist and a this. That's
all of which Dennis Prager
they
is.
do. I invited
Now he's doing the birthday boy argument for himself, which is,
all of them
you know.
onto my radio show. Any one of you 34, all 34 can come on my radio show. Not one accepted the invitation. Did one?
Yeah, because Dennis Prager's a fucking joke. Not legit, if Dennis Prager invited me to his radio show, I might not even go. And I'm fucking nobody.
One invite me into their classroom? Of course not. So constantly referring to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is nothing compared to the whole world, from the New York Times to Joe Biden. The world of the left is a world filled with smearing hate.
Stephen, let me give you the last word on
Again,
this.
none of this is
Yeah,
real.
I mean, if Biden was invited to speak about a particular BLM riot, and Biden would have ever uttered the words Antifa, stand back and stand by, like Donald Trump said,
True.
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by, I think that the conservative sphere of media would have erupted in anger. If you want to
True.
talk about like who's more divisive or not, you just need look no further than the legislation passed in Congress. You know, President Trump ran for how long on repeal and replace the ACA? He wasn't able to replace it. He ran for how long on infrastructure? Biden was the one that passed that bill. Donald Trump didn't. And in terms of Donald Trump just being one man, Donald Trump is not just one man. Donald Trump is the entirety of the conservative party right now. And if you're a conservative politician or if you're
That's
in conservative media, you absolutely know that, because you either toe his line or you are destroyed.
I want to talk a little bit about what's happening.
Okay. This is, like, correct argument, obviously. The Republican Party has been entirely captured by Trump and his rhetoric. But I think it, you know, you want to avoid the trap of implying the converse, that, like, if only the Republican Party could be freed from Trump, then, you know, like, they'd go back to normal or whatever, right? Because that's not what would happen. The Republican Party has had a taste of fascism and fascist populism, and they can't go back now. Because, like, nobody likes neoconservative rhetoric. Nobody. You know? That's why the Republicans needed to sort of incorporate the like, fascism into their platform in the first place, so they could capture a certain base of support among people who would not benefit from, you know, the massive tax cuts that they love to push through every couple of cycles or whatever. But yeah, like, Donald Trump is the ideological and like popular figurehead of the Republican Party. But without Trump, you still have the rest of the Republican Party to contend with. They're all fascists. All the Republicans that aren't fascists have either left office or like none of them are in power. If you're a Republican, you toe the party line. It's much more top down in how it gives out its marching orders and whatever. And, you know, getting rid of Trump isn't going to fix that. Not that that's necessarily what Destiny is implying, but in any form. But you don't want to sort of draw that line.
Now with the presidential race, which has been upended by Joe Biden deciding that he is not going to seek re-election. Dennis, I know from listening to you that you are not likely someone who is going to vote for the current vice president to be the next president of the United States. I don't think that'll come as a shock to our audience. What I am curious about is, do you see her as simply an elected official running a campaign with whom you disagree, or do you believe that there is the sort of danger of a Kamala Harris presidency that some associate with another presidency for Donald Trump?
Obviously, the right believes that Kamala is like an existential danger, because for them, I mentioned this during the RNC. I didn't pre-watch this, you know, pre-watched memes incoming. The right can't just have something be bad or good or whatever. It has to be like civilization threatening, because the, you know, fascists speak in superlatives. That's necessary for their narrative to hit. You know?
I didn't get the part on the Donald Trump. Do I see her as a dangerous
There is a view that Donald Trump represents a threat to democracy, and that's a phrase that we hear frequently.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So
I'm curious whether you see Kamala Harris simply as an elected official you disagree with, or do you feel that the word threat or danger applies?
Yeah, my position and my last column actually was on this subject. To me, it is completely irrelevant which leftist runs.
Really?
Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, here we go.
Adam Schiff, Gavin Newsom.
Which leftist runs? Names. It's irrelevant which leftist runs. Names exclusively liberals who hate the left. Like, none of these people are leftists. Lest anybody get the wrong impression. I don't think Destiny would consider himself a leftist either, but like, Kamala Harris, liberal. Nancy Pelosi, liberal. Fucking Gavin Newsom, the most liberal that ever liberaled, outside of maybe Emmanuel Macron. You know? You want to talk about leftists, we need to start talking about, like, Bernie Sanders and Sean Fain. Like, the... yeah.
Interchangeable. All leftists damage everything they touch. This has been
Projection.
From Lenin until the current leftists, wherever they are. Not liberals. I have...
Okay, so he's probably, when he says liberals, he probably wants to, like, refer to Dave Rubin. Like, to this guy, Dave Rubin's probably a liberal, because he went with the classical liberal line for a bit. This is plainly projection. You can find a million billion different flavors of leftists. You find them disagreeing with each other online all the time. They're, like, on Wikipedia, you can look at historical articles for like, oh, this country's economy, this country's this country's that. For leftist movements, you can find, like, half a dozen articles per country on leftist parties, movements, and politicians in that country. You know, or just parties and movements. There will be dozens of articles for each country, and it'll go deeply into the history, into the local roots that those movements have, and all sorts of stuff, because the leftist movements are grassroots. They're very complicated. What he's referring to is the thing with fascism, where fascist movements are much more top-down. There's much less to say about them because they're so cut and paste, you know? The right wing does this a lot. Projection is like the name of the game. He is that which he accuses the left of.
Great respect for liberals. I think they're naive, but I have great respect for them. Liberalism and conservatism have a great deal in common. Liberalism has...
Unintentionally revealing, but that is true. Liberals and conservatives do have a lot in common. I, however, don't respect them. Thank you. As to their naivete, yes, but he's probably referring to the fact that liberals don't believe that there's like a race war or something when he says that. When for me and other people on the left, it's more from a position of being too trusting and not willing enough to lean into systemic critiques and materialist critiques and stuff like that. Sort of, well, the ways in which we believe liberals to be naive are the ways in which they are individualist and like the ways that they would lean more into the narrative of reactionaries rather than the ways in which they would lean less into those narratives, you know? So, like, he'll say something that sounds agreeable, but I know that the reason he believes that is mostly just because, like, yeah, liberals aren't literally fascists, so, you know, naive.
There's nothing in common with leftism. Leftism hates liberalism. Leftism is illiberalism. Anti-liberal.
Not necessarily.
So I don't care who the leftist is who runs, whether it's Kamala Harris.
I want to address this not from a perspective I think it's like urgent rhetoric that needs addressing or whatever, but it is interesting philosophically. Leftism has some liberal and illiberal components to it. Economically, leftism is like, or socialism, I should just refer to it as socialism, broad umbrella. It rejects economic liberalism in some ways. But broadly, one of the intentions of leftist movements, of socialist movements, is to sort of deliver on a lot of the very rights-oriented and equality-oriented, freedom-oriented promises made by Enlightenment-era liberals that capitalism fails to deliver on. You know, like, for socialists, capitalism doesn't deliver well enough on the promises of Enlightenment liberalism, the promises of freedom and brotherhood and equality and whatever, you know? And that's the source of most of the disagreement between the left and liberals.
Harris or Gavin Newsom or somebody else. They are utterly interchangeable. Same with Joe Biden. It doesn't matter to me. I listed in one of
Not really.
25 institutions.
Again, projection, you know, the interchangeability of political figures. That's more a thing on the right.
Schools to the American Medical Association, which has announced that no birth certificate should list the sex of a child because we don't know what the sex is. The child will determine later. That's the American Medical Association because the left has taken over the AMA.
They're
taken over.
He's referring to gender, not sex. And yeah, you know, the like sex and gender are different things, but for conservatives there's like a I don't know, there's like weird spiritual determinative factor of what your gender is. Like, conservatives believe that sex and gender are different things. They just have a deterministic view of those two things. Like, look, I'm getting sidetracked. I was prepared to explain how, like, oh, you know, even if you could change every single attribute about your sex, they would still believe that you were the sex or the gender you were assigned at birth, because they're like anti-material, like anti-empiricists like that. But ultimately, I think it should just suffice to say that, like, what he's saying is a load of bullshit, and the American Medical Association, it, like, knows what they're talking about. In fact, they've lagged a little bit behind on that, behind a lot of the social climate of accepting trans people and whatever. But, you know.
For just about everything, and destroyed everything, from the Boy Scouts to military recruitment.
Here it is again, that superlative language. It can't just be that, like, oh, you know, I disagree with what the left wants for the world. It has to be the left has destroyed everything we hold dear, our traditional values, our Boy Scouts, our military, whatever. They've introduced woke.
To music, to art, to architecture. Leftism is a shark. It's a destruction machine. So
okay, that's a lot, Dennis. Let's allow Stephen to weigh in on that, and a couple of specific points that Dennis made there. One is that there's an interchangeability to who is the Democratic candidate. Number two, that leftism destroys everything it touches. And number three, he mentioned Leninism sort of in the same breath as modern Democrats. Do you think that's an apt analogy?
I fully agree with Dennis that illiberal people are a danger to society. Right now, there's only one very popular illiberal candidate, and that is easily Donald Trump. When you want to talk about people destroying democratic institutions, I would argue that probably one of the most important institutions that we have in the United States is the vote, is the idea, the concept of the peaceful transfer of power. Donald Trump
did it too far to the right there.
Ways, whether it was by encouraging people to lie and submit false electorate votes to Congress, whether it was through a multi-channel pressure against his vice president, of which Pence has come out and spoken plenty about, to get Pence to throw away the actual votes on January 6th. Whether it was getting his attorney generals to write a letter to different states to lie about them having found voter fraud, whether it was Donald Trump lying to the American public, to Raffensperger, to people, to state legislatures in Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, like all of these things. All of these actions were taken to circumvent the peaceful transfer of power, which I think is probably
Destiny's spitting so far.
Of a liberal democracy, of a democratic republic, of a constitutional republic, where we are allowed to vote on a change in leadership, and where that leadership is expected to back down or step down if they've lost the vote. So insofar as illiberalism is a huge threat in this country, I agree, but it is exclusively coming from the right now. I don't think that the leftist candidates are leftist at all, and that they're socialist or communist. Ironically, as Prager was complaining about calling everybody a Nazi, I know that Republicans have been in the business of calling everybody a communist for decades. I know
that's
that
true.
I grew up as a Republican, and I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh talk about the commies every single day. So this idea that
my condolences to Destiny's upbringing, or Destiny for his upbringing.
They're liberal. That's why the examples that Dennis gives of them destroying institutions are whether or not you list birth on a birth certificate, whether or not you list the sex, or the Boy Scouts. Or music or art or architecture. I think that threats to our democracy or the liberal order, I think, are far more evident when you look at the Republicans' attacks on our judicial system, on giving the executive branch, for instance, the power to have criminal immunity when the president takes certain acts. When you talk about trying
I'm going to let him finish with them. wanna
I mean, like, you can go on
add
and on,
something?
but the attacks on institutions from the right are far more damaging than any perceived attacks from the left.
Okay, here we go. This is a good place to put a bow on it. All of what Destiny is saying is true, but I think there's a critical component missing from that I want to address from the perspective of being the socialist. He's the liberal. He's a fascist. Like whatever. The right has been like ravenous in attacking liberal democracy and democratic institutions, right? In all the ways that Destiny mentioned. The only reason they've been as successful as they have been is because liberals are committed to not like manning the guns, basically. Liberal democracy can only come under assault when it's left so unguarded. Or like institutions are very easily, rather, I shouldn't have phrased it that way the first time. Institutions are very easily assaulted when there's no one there to defend them, or when the people there defending them just sort of let the people assaulting them on through. You know, Democrats have done like next to nothing to stop Republicans from tearing apart American democracy at the seams. And I should add as well that the reason for those anti-democratic tendencies becoming so popular and politically effective in the perception of Republicans is because of the liberal order in the first place, in the economic sense, that like people get so disaffected and like alienated that they are willing to turn to very desperate places to get solutions to their problems. I talked about this earlier in the stream where like you have centrist libs and then you have fascists. You don't have a counter narrative. You don't have a left populist antithesis to the fascists. And that is why these attacks have been happening in the first place, because Republicans think they can get away with it. And to their credit, they can get away with it, because the Democrats are not willing to do anything to stop it or to address the core issues that would make people sort of permissive of institutions getting assaulted in the first place. You know? This is one of the breaks that I will very pronouncedly have with liberal ideology being a socialist, is that like the you know, yes, fascism creates the mass graves, but liberalism creates the fascists, you know?
What about that, Dennis? Because I hear Stephen arguing that there's been sort of a reshuffling here where the illiberalism or authoritarianism is, he argues, now coming from the MAGA wing of the Republican Party. Even if you don't like leftists, would you concede that he's right to some degree about the authoritarianism?
No, because Donald Trump was president for 4 years. And we had far more freedom under Donald Trump than under Joe Biden.
This is some team sport bullshit. I don't even know how you'd measure that, but like, no.
How so?
We can give, okay, the number of mandates, for example, in the government and done by through the CDC and
deregulation he's talking about. Oh boy, COVID conspiracies, great.
If you don't get a vaccine, you're fired. If you speak dissent at a college, you're fired. The whole culture of speaking to big tech and telling them what you consider misinformation from the government, as the Prime Minister of New Zealand infamously announced, if you don't hear it from the government, it is not true. That's a left-wing position. All truth, and that's why I compare it to
what is
Leninism.
bro yapping about?
I studied Russian. I went to the Soviet Union a number of times, and he called the Soviet communist paper Pravda, means truth. Truth is what the left says truth is. For 2 years, they lied. The Columbia Journalism Review, published by
again projection.
Right-wing institutions.
This is like
sophisticated.
Exclusively projection. For most of that, I don't even know what he's like referring to. Like, well, for some of it, I know he's talking about the like mask mandates, where it's like, oh yeah, we don't want people to die and we don't want COVID to spread, so government advisory, you should wear a mask. And also, private employers are allowed to fire people at their discretion, and that includes if they are not willing to wear a mask when mask advisories are in place. And then the whole argument about like truth and some bullshit. I understand less and less what conservatives are talking about all the time. It's so like detached from anything real. Like, funnily enough, the left has been the one to pick up the mantle of freedom from government interference lately because the right wing has been very keen on government interference inside people's vaginas. You know, so I don't think that tracks particularly either. Like, I don't know, the one thing that I feel like I can latch onto that's a point that I can address is about terms of service. And that's just because conservatives don't like terms of service because it forbids them from posting, you know, deep fakes, misinformation, AI-generated porn of celebrities, and like, child sexual abuse material. All of these are things that happen overwhelmingly when terms of service are absent, and all of these things are things that don't happen overwhelmingly when terms of service are present. But, you know, conservatives love their CP, so...
or prestigious journalism school in America, Columbia University, wrote a gigantic piece, a major piece, on how much the New York Times and Washington Post lied about collusion between Trump and the Russian campaign. And if you differed with that, as you differ with anything, you were dismissed, and you were misinformation, and the way in which they have taken over Google.
Damn, it's crazy. It's almost like when you say shit that's been proven false, you're liable to be, that claim is liable to be fact-checked and like labeled as misinformation. Again, what he's arguing here is a position against there being fact-checkers. He invoked fact-checkers disingenuously earlier because they're serving a right-wing narrative. But what he's talking about is just, I want to be able to spread misinformation as though it's true with no consequences whatsoever. You don't get banned for posting misinformation on most websites. You just get hit with the little label, hey, this is misleading. Like, you can lie. That's your right. You have the right to lie and post some shit that's false. You're just going to get fact-checked for it. Conservatives just don't want to get fact-checked for it because, again, the projection, they want the truth to just be whatever they make it up to be. And the sort of whatever semblance of competent fact-checking exists gets in the way of that, you know? Censorship, like I said, only exists mostly in the case of, like, you've literally broken a law about, like, I don't know, fucking sexual harassment or child sexual abuse material or whatever by posting this. You know, like, that's the context in which you can get banned for, or like, yeah, I guess banned for posting something, when you violate terms of service so flagrantly. Posting misinformation oftentimes is, like, perfectly fine by terms of service. You just get that little label like, hey, this is misleading. You know? Basically, what I'm saying is that my man Dennis Prager wants his lolly porn. That's what I'm saying.
Is nothing compared to Donald Trump. But Donald Trump was president for 4 years. What did he do during those 4 years? Forget for the moment. I know you can't, because everything is based on January 6th. Right up till January 5th of 2021, what did Trump do in 4 years in power that compares to Biden's and the Democrats' suppression of freedom in this country?
Well, let's let Stephen answer. And I think, to be fair, Dennis, I'm just kind of an arbiter here. Some of the things you mentioned with regard to masks and vaccines, I believe they happened while Trump was president, not Joe Biden. But I'll let Stephen, if he wants to address that. But to Dennis's question, up until January 5th, 2021, what was the illiberalism?
People who actually moderate.
I would argue that the illiberalism from Trump was Trump's inability to work with Congress and trying to usurp as much power in the executive as possible to do things unilaterally as the executive without getting any kind of congressional approval or legislation from Congress, obviously. So like an example of this might be, he was unable to bring Congress together to get anything done insofar as the border or immigration goes. So instead, he relies on his executive power during times of great emergency to send the military down to the border. That's a usurping of power by the executive to try to run immigration policy on the executive. I don't think that was a very good thing because he couldn't get Congress together to do it. I think that his undermining, even if we ignore January...
I think that first thing was kind of institution brain. Theoretically, I would be in favor of a president using what executive power they have to address a certain issue, but, like, certainly the thing Trump used the power for was not good, which is almost certainly to detain more migrants rather than to actually process them once they got to the United States.
Itself, and I'll ignore the electorate fraud and everything else that he did leading up to December 14th and beyond. All of the claims that Donald Trump made about how the vote is going to be rigged, mail-in ballots are going to be rigged. Notice that if you listen to his rhetoric, he never says, this is what we need to do to secure mail-in ballots. This is what we need to do to make sure that our election is safe. All he wanted to do was get rid of mail-in ballots because he knew.
Yeah, he was only interested in like sowing doubt rather than proposing a like coherent vision, because if he did that, he would get arrested. Like Trump's coherent vision is I should be president for life and the vote doesn't matter, right? Like you can't just say that. So you have to kind of allude to it without saying anything that could really get you in trouble, which is what that is when he says like, oh, the vote's going to be rigged. It's like, okay, so how do you fix it? And then he just kind of gives you a coy little smile or whatever.
The Democrats were more likely to vote that way than Republicans. He had no desire to make the election safe. He only wanted to make sure that the election was going to be won by him. When you talk about like big tech and you talk about trying to take away freedoms using big tech, well, we just had Twitter being purchased by Elon Musk, who is, if you watch any of his tweets, is clearly a right-wing supporter. All of his speech and all of his support goes to right-wing candidates or right-wing talking points. And if you talk about a threat to the freedom of tech, well, the biggest threat that was represented to tech was when conservatives wanted to bash Twitter and Facebook over the head with restricting their section or rescinding their Section 230 protections, which would have allowed you to sue essentially people that hosted other people's posts for things that those people posted. You want to talk about destroying big tech or censoring big tech? Removing Section 230 protections would have been the number one way to do it. And then when you want to talk about like, all
right,
like
I gotta pause
made
this.
by big tech, if you want to call those censored.
All right, I have to pause this to maybe expand a little bit on what Destiny said there, because I do agree on a fundamental level with what he's saying. Yeah, this is a bit what I mentioned earlier with like conservatives just being interested in not being punished for the shit that they say, or whatever. Like if conservatives already are disproportionately the big violators of terms of service, so basically what they want to do is strip the ability of big corporations that have platforms like that to have terms of service in the first place, so they can either post whatever they want or nobody gets to post what they want. You know, it's all from that position of controlling the social media space. You know, conservatives, funnily enough, do care a lot about control and controlling stuff. You know. No, that's so bad. Dang.
We got the full Twitter files leaks, and as much as Republicans try to rewrite the record, Taibbi himself said, when it comes to the New York Post story, for instance, there was not a single example, there was no evidence whatsoever of government intrusion into Twitter to ask them to remove that story. But you better believe when that one comedian lady said that Donald Trump was I think a pussy-ass bitch, she tweeted, Donald Trump sent in a request to Twitter to have them remove that tweet because he didn't like it. So.
That's true. Free speech until it offends my fifis, in which case I will literally personally ask Twitter to ban the guy that posted. Nice.
If you want
this is one of the ways in which fascists disingenuously use certain political positions to get what they want. Like a lot of times you'll see people on the right arguing that in favor of free speech or whatever. What that means is just what Dennis Prager said, which is they don't want to be fact checked whenever they say something like misinformation or misinformation adjacent, and they don't want to be allowed to be banned. It's literally just free speech for me, not for thee. That's it.
Tech censorship or attempts to do so. We can talk about Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter. We can talk about the types of requests that Donald Trump sent into Twitter, as opposed to the Biden administration, who when they sent in requests for specific tweets to be taken down, it was because they were of pictures of Hunter Biden, I'll just say that, not even close to comparable.
True.
And yeah, when you talk about like authoritarian actions, I think that one of the largest authoritarian actions you can take is to try to usurp as much power for yourself as possible. And that might be done in terms of running things that should be done by Congress, like immigration policy, by using the military.
Yeah.
And that might be done in ways of like undermining an upcoming election and saying that the election is going to be fraudulent, or it might be done in ways of like avoiding ever being held responsible for things that you do for criminal activity, right? The Supreme Court's granted him criminal immunity. He wasn't impeached in the Senate because they said, oh, well, we can't impeach him. He's already out of office. And he pardoned almost every single person that worked with him. Why would he pardon people like Paul Manafort? That's so crazy. I understand why people might want to argue for pardons for maybe like Flynn or maybe Stone, but Paul Manafort, why? It was so crazy. You can look up how many pardons he's done on the presidential website. It's insane compared to any other president.
Yeah.
What do you
This is one of the ways in which Trump has like undermined democracy, is just the flippant use of pardons. Like, yeah, all the people who worked with me or for me, you will get pardoned. I will use my I will use the position of the law to like basically absolve you of all wrongdoing, despite the fact that you've committed like some of the biggest crimes on the books. You know, like basically saying, oh yeah, anybody who is ideologically on my side, I will make sure that the law does not touch you. You know? And like, to some degree, that's a problem with the system itself, that like anybody has the fucking power to do that. You know? In fact, I would argue that it is a pretty glaring problem that those kinds of pardons are allowed in the first place. But it just goes, again, it just goes to the point that, like, they're very interested in undermining the stability of democratic institutions. The right is, the fascists are. Because that's the only way they can gain power, is when they, like, you know, when they don't play fair, for lack of a better term. Sorry, I'm having to concentrate on the race a bit. And, you know, Trump has also been known to enjoy the company of other authoritarians as well. It's not like a... it's a pretty well-known phenomenon all on its own. So it stands to reason that he is, well, all things authoritarian.
think, Dennis? I mean, certainly it sounds like a lot of unilateral action.
Sorry, I'm yapping a little
Do you
bit.
defend all of the things? Do you dispute that Trump did any of the things Stephen mentioned? And if you don't dispute it, do you defend it?
Yeah, he started to build a wall. That was I don't know whether it's in his province or not. I don't know what.
Oh, speaking on the subject of the wall, I think this is one of the ways in which the Democrats have massively fallen short. Just a side note, is that they have capitulated so hard to Republicans on immigration that now they're like occasionally engaging in talking points about a border wall. And this is what enables fascism too, because by capitulating ground to the fascists, you legitimize them and you make their objectives easier for them to achieve. This is what I meant when I said that, like, this is the purpose of liberals when I was talking about French politics, to cede ground to the right and make the right's objectives easier for them to achieve. Like, they never work with the left. Not like of their own accord anyway.
What the law is. But it is true. He could not get Congress to agree because the Democrats, since Ted Kennedy in the 1990s, have worked to open the border. You cannot have a civilization with an open border. That is a given.
Source?
I assume Stephen would agree with.
Disregard all of the all of the like thousands of years of human civilization where borders were very open, and notably society did not collapse, you know, on a broad scale. You know, never mind all of that. You know, you can't have society without a border. Because fucking... You'll note that they always phrase this as a common sense talking point, because there actually isn't anything to back it up. Like, who the fuck says that, you know, you have to have a border for society to exist? You don't. Like, you never have had to. There are plenty of societies in the past that have had open borders and have been perfectly, like, well, stable and functioning by the standards of the day. You know, and certainly the reason that society is more stable and functioning now relative to hundreds of years ago, it has nothing to do with the border, the state of like whether a border is like open or closed or whatever. It has to do with income, wealth, and like class inequality and stuff like that. Yay, first place.
That open border and keeping a country intact are mutually exclusive. Can we agree on that?
No?
Yeah, that's
'Cause
why nobody asks for an open border.
Big L, but also, like, that's not even part of the discussion right now. Also, he's talking about this as a prescriptive. If you have an open border, you still have a border. Like, it's a thing that can be opened or closed, right? In fact, first world countries rely on the borders being more so open than closed because otherwise they don't have a source of population growth or new labor, really.
Oh, yes, the Democrats.
Like, I've talked about
this.
this.
If you deny that, that's good. You'll be on record then as saying...
Well, define it as policy, Dennis, so we could agree.
It's really critical, really critical. Do you believe, Stephen, that the Democrats have been for a controlled border and not for an open border?
I only fucking wish the Democrats were for an open border.
In the last 10 years.
You know,
I think
but they
the
haven't
Democrats
been.
tried to pass comprehensive legislation that was written by Lankford, a Republican in the Senate. I think Donald Trump and the Republicans are the ones that killed that, and that was on public record.
Please
So
answer
no,
my question.
the Democrats have not
Okay,
been
do
for
you
open
believe
borders.
the Democrats are for a closed border? Okay,
It's not
all
just
right, good,
closed
good,
or open,
okay.
but
Can you
nobody's
define it, though,
argue.
for us?
The
Hold on,
borders,
hold on, hold on.
Also, love the simpleton conservative worldview that a border can only be this thing like a door that's closed or opened, and it can't have, like, as if it's not this, like, arbitrary line that has all sorts of complexities tied to it that have to be managed by, like, laws and jurisdictions and shit. You know, great, very good. This is the guy on the right that, like, markets himself as an intellectual, right? Like, this is who the right wing views as, like, smart. Is this guy. Ow.
Very complicated thing.
Can
Yeah,
you define
it's
what
not
you
complicated.
it is
at
very
all.
complicated.
It's not complicated.
Define
I'm sorry that
open
you just
border.
don't have much information. about it.
Procedurally, it is very complicated.
All right, as I said, I prefer clarity to agreement.
Can you define open border, Dennis?
Yes, letting anybody who wants to come into this country come in. It's not complex.
That,
And
what?
then to be clear, you think that that's the case right now?
That's the case right now. And that is the case what the Democrats want. That is correct. They have
I know some
sanctuary
asylum
cities
officials who would
all over
disagree
my
with
state.
that.
Excuse
Sorry.
me, sanctuary city has nothing to do with immigration
Oh,
policy.
sure as it does. If you are here illegally, we will not allow ICE or anyone else to take you away.
That's-
You can come. That's what sanctuary city
That
means.
is not what a sanctuary city is. That's
really?
not
What
what a
does it
sanctuary.
mean?
Sure, I can tell you what it means. When it comes to enforcing immigration, that is exclusively in the purview of the United States government. Now, it tends to be the case that if you're a state official, you can collect information about whether or not a person's here legally or not. And if you want, you can turn that information over to federal authorities, like Immigrations and Customs Enforcement or like the Department of Homeland Security. You don't have an obligation to do so. And some cities explicitly say we won't. So a sanctuary city is just a city where if they arrest you, they're not going to do an immigration check. And if you fail, they're going to turn you over to the federal authorities. As somebody that is a conservative, who I imagine would have an appreciation for the concept of federalism, but the important protections of states' rights, because that's what we said when we.
This
put
is
abortion back in the
procedural as
state.
shit,
You
but,
should
like-
champion a state deciding whether or not they would want to cooperate with a federal authority when it comes to turning somebody over for matters of deportation. But a sanctuary city does not legally.
Remember, this whole, like, discussion of the procedural minutia is just because Dennis Prager is objectively wrong in like all of his positions on the border. His position is so stupid it takes like 10 fucking minutes of explanation to explain to him why it's stupid and why he's wrong. Like, that's the state of his brain right now. That's the state of the conservative discourse. Like, it's baby brain shit.
Legalize illegal immigration. It's just whether or not a city wants to cooperate with federal investigators when it comes to turning over an undocumented citizen or immigrant.
Fine. Okay, we can continue.
Do you agree with that, Dennis? I mean, do you recognize that it's an issue of state?
The issue of people crossing a federal border is a federal issue. It is not just a state issue. Okay, it is so elementary. It's a national border. It's not just a state border.
I'd be really
Okay.
careful with that because that wasn't Abbott's argument when he wanted to enforce the border in Texas. He said that the Texas National Guard should be that way. You
I
just
said
used
it's
the
not
Biden
just. I said
administration.
it's not just. Well, because there's no federal oversight. Because the Democrats are happy to have a great number of people come in.
Everything is because Democrats open borders. Democrats, dog. I only fucking wish the Democrats were as cool as Dennis Prager is making them sound. This is stupid. This is actually pretty characteristic of like a a debate between, I guess, a liberal and a fascist is that they get bogged down on the policy minutia, where obviously the liberal is correct, having a better understanding of the facts and the system, but the fascists like just trying to cook something up to serve an anti-immigrant narrative and doesn't care. They have such a resistance to learning because they know that any understanding of the world that they live in would like inevitably lead to a conclusion that doesn't support their worldview. You know? Liberals like just have an incorrect interpretation of what is otherwise a decently solid set of material facts. Like, the scale of those facts varies, but like, conservatives just don't believe in facts at all. They it's like what's the term? There's like the fascist narrative, of course, but it's like the facts only exist in service of the narrative. If they are inconvenient, that they're like not real or whatever.
Democratic voters in their view.
I think it's
But
fair.
so,
Can I
Dennis,
ask
are
for-
you-
is there,
hold
wait,
on,
is there a
Stephen,
single
let's-
lawmaker or is there a single prominent Democrat that said we want open borders?
No.
Okay.
Great, awesome.
And so what are
He
the
admitted.
open border policies, Dennis? If the sanctuary city you concede,
is not relevant, but the answer is no. Okay, go ahead.
if you concede that the sanctuary cities themselves are not the border, what are the open border policies that are at issue that you would want Stephen to either defend or denounce?
So, we have to have only legal immigration. I don't know. The rendering of a simple.
All immigration is illegal. That's how the state treats it. That's the nature of a border.
The political issue, the real issue. The real issue.
God, I
is
fucking hate nation
that
states and their
under
accolades.
Democratic influence since Ted Kennedy. This is not new, but it has been hastened under Joe Biden. The border has been essentially open to millions of people to come into this country.
Essentially open. I wonder why he didn't say open, just open, because maybe because it hasn't been. Dude, there's been a number of news stories where border guards have literally gotten in like in hot water, where news outlets have reported like, oh yeah, people are just getting shot at the border, like not even being allowed to cross, being shot at the border. That's what the whole debacle with the Biden admin and the state governments was about, was that they were putting razor wire in the water before people got to the border. Like, they were still in Mexico and they were dying because of American razor wire that the state government had put in the river. So
Illegally, and you can't even say illegal alien.
so that like before those immigrants had even gotten to the border where they could legally declare asylum and enter within the parameters of the law, they were already being treated as violations of the law. That's how the immigration system works. There is, like, people say, like, oh, we only want legal immigration. What they mean is they don't want any immigration, because they know that all immigration is treated as illegal by the state. That's how a nation-state border works, is that it is assumed that it is illegal to cross unless the parameters are specifically set up to basically ensure otherwise. And in the case of the United States, the border police and like, you know, state officials, whatever, have been arresting people before they even get to the border, at which point they can then declare asylum. The United States is breaking our own law and international law because we fundamentally view all immigration as illegal, or at least the government does. I got somebody. I didn't get an item. That's unfortunate. Well, I can
You
resume
can't
here.
say alien and you can't say illegal. You now say undocumented
What the fuck?
immigrant. The very fact
Yeah, that's
that
the
they
legal
changed the
term
language is
for
proof
them.
that they are for it.
Okay, let's briefly talk about Project 2025, as we don't have unlimited time. Stephen, I'll go first to you. Project 2025 fears that we're hearing about from the left media ecosystem right now. well-founded fears or overblown
Ow.
or hyperbolic?
I'm dead as fuck.
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't really focus much on policy for conservatives because I don't think conservatives have or run on policy anymore. I think that all of the fears around Donald Trump have to do with his disdain for the constitutional democratic republic that we have and his desire to usurp as much power into his sole position as president as possible, and that's what I focus on. I know that I've seen people talk
Use
about
the shock.
Project
Use it.
2025 and people have fears of Project
Please.
2025, but conservatives know
It gets me
nothing
past this
about
part. That's
policy,
good.
and they
Oh,
don't
baby.
even care to
That's
run on
great.
policy anymore, so I
God
just
dang
really
it.
don't focus much on the particular aspects of that platform, although I wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump and his administration wanted to push a lot, given some of the quotes that have come out. I think from Donald Trump in the past, and I think J.D. Vance about it.
Project 2025 is the GOP policy manifesto.
It's not a thing that I particularly focus on.
And to be clear, Stephen, you don't focus on it because you don't genuinely think Trump knows anything about it or cares about policy, or because you think it's unlikely to be implemented?
I don't know what the final versions of it would look like when it comes to implementation. I don't know if Republicans will have the necessary majorities in the House or Senate to pass it.
I think this is actually kind of a, like, I guess miscalculated take from Destiny. I don't agree with the spirit of what he's saying here. I think Project 2025 is like a massive threat, more so than Donald Trump himself, because Project 2025 is what the Republican Party like wants to do when they get in power. It's one of the few times that they've had like legitimate hit the ground running moment, and it like revolves around stripping away the rights of basically every minority that you can think of in America. Damn it, that's why I didn't want to do that. Alright, 8th place.
My concern is far more singularly with Donald Trump as the head executive than it is with any particular policy platform, because Donald Trump is just not a very effective leader. He's not a good politician. When they were in office, they couldn't pass any policy.
That's why Project 2025 exists, by the way, because Trump is not very is not competent on its own. The Republican Party decided, all right, we're going to have a like mobilized group of state bureaucrats who are loyal to Trump, but will ultimately do the heavy lifting for him. So all he has to do is sign his name on the dotted line, and then bam, it becomes law. And then that's the conservative like mobilization plan. I've mentioned all the shit, the horrible shit that Project 2025 wants to do, and make no mistake, Republicans intend to do that. That's going to be their like their policy vision for the United States under whatever name they choose, Project 2025, Agenda 47, whatever they rebrand it to if Trump loses. That's going to be their plan for the time being until the Republican Party is gone. You know, and I think that is the threat posed by the Republican Party. It is not Trump, it is what Trump represents.
They couldn't actually get,
or what is behind Trump, rather.
I'm not as concerned about a policy platform as I am about what Donald Trump wants to do as the president or as the executive.
Dennis, what about you? What are your thoughts on the discussion that's been growing, certainly in the last few weeks?
We largely agree. 2025 is irrelevant to the Trump administration, and he has said so. I don't know anyone who's read it.
I wonder if Dennis Prager has any motives in saying something like this.
The Heritage Foundation is a conservative think tank. There are left-wing think tanks, liberal think tanks, conservative think tanks, right-wing think tanks, and they're all permitted to put out whatever they want. Am I permitted? And I'm not being cute. If I'm not, I'm not. But can I ask Stephen a question?
Please.
Okay. So Stephen, how do you stand on men who say they're women competing in women's sports?
What the? Literally just pivoted. Okay. Understandable. The fascist did not want to talk about Project 2025 because that looks really bad for him. Kind of shocked that Destiny doesn't know about what Project 2025 is, considering he's been doing a lot of like MAGA oriented content lately. I guess I haven't seen most of his stuff, so I don't know whether he just decided didn't want to talk about it or whatever. God, they're so fucking obsessed with trans people though. This is like, it's such a non-issue. It's like not even worth refuting. I like, skip button, basically. I guess I'm curious as to what Destiny says, but like, jeez, man. Absolutely stupid set of talking points.
I'm assuming the question has to do with trans people competing in sports. I think that my personal view is that sports up through probably high school are just there for people to kind of like play games and get along with each other and, you know, like build camaraderie and stuff. So I don't really have much of a concern past or up to that point. Once you get to NCAA or professional events, I think that the dividing between the sexes is very important for athletic competition. So I'm generally opposed to trans people participating.
Cringe.
You know then that the Biden administration has extended the
Cringe-ass take.
Anti-discrimination legislation passed to protect women. They have
Cringe-ass take. Like, the fact that you're even engaging on this is like revealing, I think. I think it's revealing of how little conservatives care about anything. He'll just bounce from topic to topic, despite being obviously incorrect on all of it, because he just doesn't care. He just believes in power and, you know, making everybody's life miserable for a supposed, like, fascist utopia. You know, the heaven on earth thing. I mean, yeah, like, Destiny is right to say that, like, you know, sports in school is just, that's just to play. It doesn't really matter. But then, like, sports at a competitive level, just let them do the hormones for a couple years, have them test, and then let them play the sport anyway. Look, it's so much of a non-issue that I actually haven't even seen the right wing go to it a lot lately. Like, who the fuck cares, really? Like, if trans people are participating in sports. And you know that this only applies to trans women too, because like the conservatives are so obsessed with the concept of a supposed man who forsakes their masculinity or whatever, you know. It's really frustrating to hear people ever like engage with this at all because it's so dumb. Let the trans comrades play basketball. Like, fucking what's the problem? What is the problem? Legitimately.
Extended it to trans people. You are aware of that?
That they've done what?
They have extended it to trans people so that...
Wait, extended what to trans people? I'm sorry.
You cannot discriminate against trans people. If a man says he is a woman...
Damn, that's crazy! You can't discriminate against trans people? What a world!
I'm not aware of that right now. I thought it went the opposite. My understanding, just to be clear, my understanding is that right now they can't.
All right, so what is your position since...
So, shoutouts to Dennis Prager for giving the game away. He just wants to be able to discriminate against trans people. Like, the fucking whiny snowflake bitches. It is insane that the left and liberals ever let conservatives get away with the narrative that, like, the left and the liberals are actually the snowflakes. Because conservatives, like... will just say, like, yeah, when, you know, this bill that protects women and their rights doesn't allow us to discriminate against trans people. Like, yeah, crazy. You can't discriminate against people who are part of a protected class, in this case being gender identity. I'm driving like shit.
The whole left stinks. You think Donald Trump stinks. So I talk about the left. So let's go to Gavin Newsom. In California, where I live, there was...
And then he just pivots. Great. He doesn't care about anything. Why did you throw that backwards, you dumbass?
Says that she is a boy, and the school is not permitted to tell the parents that the girl thinks she is a boy and goes by a boy's name in her school. Do you think...
Okay, this is another thing that this framing is already a load of bullshit. What he's referring to is not that teachers are not allowed to tell the parents, but rather they have to respect the wishes of the kid if the kid doesn't want to tell their parents, right? This is part of avoiding abuse. This is part of trying to help kids escape abusive home situations, but conservatives are in favor of abusing kids, so they don't want to do that. The policy that the law he's referring to was meant to address is basically to say, teachers can tell the parents, but there can't be a law requiring them to tell the parents, right? If the kid doesn't want the teacher to tell the parents, then the teacher doesn't tell. If the kid is okay with telling the parents and they tell the teacher, then the kid can tell the parents all the same. You know, The kids have agency. They're people. They can make their own decisions in some capacity. The only reason you would die on this hill is if you wanted it to be easier for parents to abuse children, or for kids to be abused outside of school. Because in school, a lot of times, it's a much more progressive and accepting environment than the home or the church. Because the home and the church are much more insular. The church, particularly, disproportionately more conservative. This is just pedo shit, what Dennis Prager is going to go off on
I
here.
think that is a moral and good law.
I don't think about this. I'm so sorry, but when I look at Donald Trump,
Correct take from Destiny.
overthrow the election and resist the peaceful transfer of power, I can't think of a thing that
okay.
I think less
There we
about
go.
than how
Okay,
where
so it's
trans
all
people
right.
stand. Just to be
It's
clear,
all
hold on. Just to be
Trump.
clear for
It's
people
all-
that don't know. Just to be clear for people that don't know my background.
You
Okay.
guys
Hold
on
on.
the left should thank God every day for
Hold
Donald
on, we'll
Trump.
wait,
You
Dennis.
should say,
If
even
Steven,
you're an
hold on.
atheist-
If Steven doesn't want to answer the question as you see it, allow him not to answer it.
Sure.
But let's
Or
hear
I'll
what
answer it.
you
No,
want to
no,
say.
I'll
okay,
answer it.
so fine, that's fine.
I was banned from Twitch for opposing the integration of trans people into sports. I don't think it's a
Cringe. W on Twitch's part definitely deserved to be banned for that shit.
appropriate. I probably
It's just
stand
dumb.
in
I
didn't
opposition
ask
to a
that
lot of the
question.
very,
I
very
asked-
far left.
okay.
What?
They
Also, that's kind of, whether or not you disagree with that, that's also Twitch's prerogative. Something that Dennis Prager doesn't like, or probably does, like, is okay with
the
because it's
law-
Destiny
okay,
or
so
whatever.
let me just go on record. I can give you the rest. We could talk hours.
Sure. What's the California law for the 8-year-old? Go ahead. What was it?
Yes, you cannot. A school cannot tell a parent, and not doesn't have to, is not allowed to tell a parent. if
That's
a
not the
child
content of the law, he's just
identifies
lying.
the other sex in a California school.
That would probably be something I'd be opposed to as a parent. I think I would want to know that if my kid was identifying as a different gender in class.
Correct.
All right, that's like a massive L from both of these people. That like yeah, if you're a parent, you probably want to know that, but your kid has the right not to tell you, and the teacher has the right not to tell you. Like, you know, again, this law is about preventing abuse in a like abusive home situation. If the kid doesn't feel comfortable telling the parents, they don't have to. It is not your right. However much people will get ass mad over this, if you're a parent, it is not your right to know every detail of your kids' lives. Your kid is a person too. They have a right to privacy, you know? And part of that includes, if they're not comfortable coming out to you, then they shouldn't be legally, like, teachers shouldn't be legally compelled to out kids to their parents. Especially if there's, like, if the kid expresses that they don't want that to happen, then that, like, should give anybody some serious pause. It's like, whoa, hold on, something might be, you know, going on here that could potentially endanger this kid if, you know, if their parents knew about this. Like, you know, think for 2 fucking seconds about the circumstances that would need to exist for a kid in school to confide in a teacher about coming out, whether it be coming out as gay or coming out as trans or whatever, but not to confide in the parents. And the conservative hill that they're dying on is you should be required to tell the parents anyway. That kid's probably going to get the shit beaten out of them. They're probably going to literally get locked in the closet. And that's exactly what conservatives want.
If it weren't for Trump, you would have to spend the time with me or anyone else defending the left and their scummy little.
Oh my god, you wheelie bumped me in the air.
Kids
Dumbass.
and have girls get
That's what you fucking get.
cut off at 18 or even younger. What is being? It's like it matters. All that matters is January 6th.
Very interested in the breasts of, like, underage girls.
Because he tried to rebel. It was a rebellion
No,
against
they
the peaceful
didn't
transfer
try
of
to
power.
rebel. He told people to go peacefully to the halls of Congress.
He
did
told
not
Mike
tell-
Pence, why were they going there? What were they going there for?
To protest the results of the election.
Exactly.
Because they thought it was cheating. You're right.
Exactly.
You're
It was an
allowed to
insurrection. They
protest.
thought, no, you're not allowed to
No,
protest
you're
with
not allowed
violence.
to overthrow, but you were allowed to protest.
When they were going there to support Mike Pence, what?
They were allowed to protest. He's very conveniently leaving out the part where a bunch of, like, right-wing, insane, like, weirdos stormed the Capitol building, you know, beat the shit out of police officers, killed one of them, and like threatened the lives of several Congress people and chanted "Hang Mike Pence." I wonder if there's any possible indication of violent action or intent that could be taken from, you know, the January 6th rioters, insurrectionists that went into the Capitol building with flex cuffs, some of them with paramilitary gear, and looking for particular Congress people's offices. I wonder what they could have been intending to do. Again, he's just transparently dishonest. The real position here is that he doesn't believe in anything and that he thinks January 6th was good, and he'll do he'll go to any length of being weaselly and lying to justify it, or to play cover for the January 6ers. That's it. I didn't get the trick. That's unfortunate. Oh, you dumbass. You fucking went wide to hit me. Why'd you do that? Oh, okay. He got hit. Turnabout's fair play. Hook the fuck. Alright. I'm gonna try to bag on lap 3.
Exactly.
Yes, that's
Correct.
right. Okay, okay.
Which was against the ECA, right? That was illegal under the Electoral Count Act, right?
But I don't agree with that, and
that's fine. I don't agree with insurrectionists either, but you understand the ridiculousness of wanting to have a man who's now usurped criminal immunity as the president. So a lot of the illegal actions that he took. Remember, Roberts, in his opinion, said explicitly that when Donald Trump told his acting and his deputy attorney general, can you guys write notes to the state legislatures to say that we found evidence of voter fraud that wasn't there? We can't even criminally review that anymore, right? So a man who's now criminally immune, who tried to overthrow the government, yeah, that's going to stand out more in my mind, even if they failed at it, than whether or not 8-year-olds in California, their teachers tell their parents if they're trans or whatever. I didn't say it doesn't matter, but some things matter more than other things.
Right, in the day, you're right. It matters
less.
I
am.
What happened on January 6th. January 6th is wildly overblown. It was it wasn't
still only got 6.
Not a single person has been arrested or indicted on insurrection. Donald Trump.
By the way, this is a massive point against the Democrats that fucking nobody got basically nobody got arrested and indicted for this, which he's lying. There were people that got arrested and indicted. It was just stunningly few, and for trespassing charges, basically. This is part of what I meant when I said that the only reason that fascists are able to attack democracy so consistently and effectively is because liberals do nothing to defend it. This is what defending democracy would entail. You go up, you look up every single fucking person that was at that insurrection, you arrest all of them, right to fair trial and all that. They get their due process, but at the end of the day, you did the crime, you're going to do the time. And there have to be not only guardrails set up, but people willing to man those guardrails. And liberals aren't willing to do either of those things. In fact, that the liberal inaction in appointing Supreme Court justices, the sort of kowtowing to Republican chicanery in the House and Senate when judicial nominations were happening years ago, is what led to a Supreme Court so slanted that they straight up ruled that Donald Trump and any other former president is above the law. That liberals share the blame for that. Never let them forget.
Is a left-wing lie about what happened on January 6th. I don't like January 6th. I condemned it when it happened. It was not an insurrection. That the language that
For somebody who condemned January 6th, he's very suspiciously invested in defending January 6th. Again, he doesn't believe in anything. This is why you can't debate conservatives. They'll just fucking go from one thing to another. To them, it's entertaining, I guess, that somebody could believe in something. And I don't fully agree with all the stuff that Destiny's been saying either. I don't agree with say that excessive focusing on Donald Trump. I think there's more to it than that. I don't agree with his takes on trans people, whatever. But he believes in something. It's clear he doesn't just not care about anything. My man has political beliefs,
uses fascist, Nazi, insurrection.
Then don't be a fascist or Nazi, and also don't do insurrection, and you won't get called those things. It's not that difficult. I think, conservatives, again, this is about just not wanting to suffer any accountability or consequences for the actions that you do. Not just don't do those actions. You won't suffer consequences for them. And look, suffering consequences is a very charitable way of putting it, because like I said, liberal political officials and you know, politicians and whatever have been very, very abstemious and very committed to not rendering those consequences. Ow. Fuck. No! What the I swear I did not tilt that way in midair. Game's fucking messing with me today.
First of all, I've never denied that the left engages in divisiveness. Of course they do. I'm just saying that Joe Biden himself doesn't, which is evident enough by how much joint legislation he's passed. This guy's got 40 years, in government. Of course, this guy, has relationships with people, isn't as divisive as he seems, and I think that's evidenced by what he can pass. To say that the insurrection is the language of leftists, this is the language that came to us in the 14th Amendment after the Reformation, when, surprise, surprise, after the Civil War, people in Congress didn't want leadership again. That was part of the Civil War. That shouldn't be that shocking. There's nothing left-wing about that idea. That should be a very American idea. Okay. We don't want people that would try to insurrect the government to fight against it. Also, if we want to talk about health issues, we're welcome to.
Unfortunately for Destiny, it is actually I mean, this is good framing, but it is a left-wing idea that you shouldn't let literal fascists who are contrary to the Constitution or whatever. It is a left-of-center idea that you shouldn't let Nazis run the government. That is a left-wing idea, comparatively speaking. Like, if you have dead center, and then you have left and right, it would be left of center to say Nazis shouldn't be in charge and to enshrine that into law, or say that former Confederate insurrectionists shouldn't be in charge and to enshrine that into the law.
To talk about it as well, but I care way less about.
But again, this is Dennis Prager carrying a suspiciously large amount, or seeming to at least, about defending January 6th and saying it wasn't an insurrection, but also, it was just a peaceful protest. I disagree with it, but also it wasn't an insurrection, and they should have been allowed to do that.
The leftists have crazy views on 8-year-olds being trans, which I think is really stupid, by the way, and I agree that that's stupid. But I care way more about the fact that I don't know if we're going to have a new vaccine in this country that is going to have mass protests against it now, because conservatives become the party of anti-vax. I think that's a far more pressing public health matter than trans kids.
Yes, because the CDC is in cahoots with Big Pharma. And
in cahoots! My God, dude.
About distance and about lockdowns.
This guy is so fucking transparently unserious.
Because of the lie that lockdowns were necessary for kids. Sweden didn't lock down one day for kids, not one kid died. That you defend the CDC, the NIH, and the Democrats, and for that matter, any Republicans who supported lockdowns, it will not be something you will be proud of when you look back at your career.
Yeah, and the entire world was all in cahoots for all the people. You point out Sweden. Compare Sweden's death rates to every other European country, even the other Scandinavian countries that did enact lockdowns, and more people died in Sweden.
I have compared them.
Okay, then you know that Sweden fared about the worst of any of those countries.
Only if you compare them to
Scandinavia. Fuck.
And Finland has announced that it would do exactly what Sweden did if it ever happened again. They were wrong in locking down their students. If you're on the record as defending nearly 2 years of lockdowns of students, and
this is so dumb. I'm not even. Yeah, how did we get on this subject? Thank you, Destiny, for asking what I'm thinking about in the moment. This is so stupid. I don't even feel the need to engage with it. I'm just gonna take a beat here to chain this item and then move on.
How did this come to just lockdown of students? The lockdowns affected more than just the students, right? Okay, because you said that like 3 times.
It's egregious because kids were hurt more than adults were because of the lockdown. That's why I'm noting kids.
Sure.
And because it was particularly irrelevant because kids were not dying of COVID, whereas old people were.
Sure, but the issue was that teachers tend to be older people, and they were the ones that were worried.
Yes.
Whether or not the lockdowns were...
No teacher died in Sweden.
Whether or not the lockdowns were good or bad...
No teacher died in Sweden.
This is so dumb. This is just an argument against modern medicine. Like, oh no, don't quarantine when there's a pandemic? Like, great. Tell me more about how you definitely aren't in a death cult. Like, Give me a fucking break. This is, again, I shouldn't even be entertaining this. This will probably be the last debate review I do for quite some time. I don't object to doing content reacts and stuff, but I've noticed that, like, conservatives just don't they're basically not even at a human level of intelligence anymore. Like, this is the kind of tier of engagement that they're offering, that, like, yeah, we shouldn't have done lockdowns. Also, schools should be forced to out kids to their parents if they're gay or trans. Also, fucking Democrats want an open border. Also, and like, it's exhausting, and it's clear that they'll just say the same shit. There's no avenue through which to get some genuine, like, dunk. It's very hard to get those dunks, because in order for those to be effective, they have to care about what they're talking about. Conservatives don't care. They are immune to being wrong because they don't believe in facts as a concept.
The lockdowns were despicable.
Whether or not
that is the reason that people are very, very suspicious, and should be. I was never. My brother is a professor of medicine. I trusted doctors like I trusted my own parents. I trusted the medical community. I don't any longer. They've lost my trust.
Yep. Now you trust Joe Rogan and Donald Trump. Yeah. Now we trust podcasts.
Yeah, seriously, this is like
vested interest in lying to you about things in order to make more ad revenue and to sell you more products for whatever vitamin boost or whatever.
Okay.
If you want to talk about lockdowns and them being good or bad, I think at this point, I think the evidence is out that the lockdowns were probably too aggressive. I think most people agree with that. The issue is whether they were good or bad.
No, if anything, I think that, like, the evidence supports the lockdowns being not aggressive enough, at least from the get-go. You know, America took way too long to recognize the pandemic as something serious. That was probably the biggest problem with the lockdowns. And also, we didn't realize how big of a component masks were in preventing the spread of the virus, because this goes back to, like, a video I watched where this guy that was much more well-informed about the spread of disease was talking about it. But, like, COVID, initially they thought it was spread by, like, by water or something like that. That's why there was all those advisories about washing your hands and stuff like that. And then the masking was kind of an afterthought. But later on, they realized that it was spread through airborne particulates. You know, it was an airborne virus. And so that's, like, if anything, I think it wasn't that the lockdowns were too aggressive, but rather that they, like, focused on the wrong health precautions. You know? Does that make sense? But look, I don't want to overly fixate on that, because, like, the point is, I think broad strokes Destiny has a much more agreeable position than Dennis Prager here, which is that, like, yeah, lockdowns are probably a good idea in principle when there's a fucking pandemic happening. You know, because you got to quarantine. You got to limit the spread of the disease until such time that a vaccine exists.
It's that you conservatives assume that they were done maliciously. The entire world came together to maliciously lock. It's not irrelevant.
You know what?
The motivation for why.
Obsession with the plot. Point number fucking, I forget what point it is, but this is a significant component of fascism. They are so conspiracy brained endlessly.
Malicious. I don't give a damn if it was malicious. It ruined societies. It ruined
Source?
children's lives.
Source? Well, it did make some people's lives a bit tougher, but, like, that was the disease, not the lockdowns. If anything, the lockdowns limited the damage that the disease did.
You don't think the intention of a policy matters when it comes to trusting them in the future? You don't think knowing if they were acting maliciously or not isn't important?
You know, I actually think that doesn't count for much. Yeah, I'll bite that bullet. Because the intent of policy is its outcomes. If a policy has bad outcomes and that doesn't change the behavior of somebody, even if they have, like, even if you could have a conversation with them, if they still push for disagreeable policies and don't learn from them or whatever, I would consider that, you know, those intentions then irrelevant in the face of those political outcomes. Yeah. I guess that gets into, like, a fine-tuning of what we mean by intentions and whatever, but I guess my main critique is just, like, you know, well, I don't know if I necessarily have a critique, rhetorically speaking, about this point, because, like, it is obviously very relevant to hammer in on how, like, conspiracy-brained conservatives are. They are very conspiracy-brained.
It's that you conservatives assume that they were done maliciously. The intention of a policy matters when it comes to trusting them in the future. You don't think knowing if they were acting maliciously or not isn't important? important in deciding if you would trust them
it's
for bigger.
not. No, and by the way, well, I will say this with regard to the vaccines and the fact that they were not tested and they were unleashed upon people, and that they told children, they still told little babies should get these vaccines when babies aren't dying of COVID. I think there was an element of maliciousness, not in the sense of we want to hurt people, but we want to have the profits that big pharma enables us to have. Because
this guy doesn't give a shit about the big pharma either. This gets to a little bit with that obsession with the plot, but it's also like this also speaks to the disingenuous populism of fascism. Invoking the language of being critical of big pharma is a very populist thing to do. A lot of people on the left do it. Bernie Sanders does it. But when people on the left talk about the ways in which pharmaceutical companies are very predatory, there are things that they suggest, that we suggest, to address that, controlling the prices of prescription drugs, a single-payer health care system, the likes of which exists in other first-world countries, and like nationalizing some of the pharmaceutical industry as well. You know, solutions to the problem. You can't just agree on the problem, and we don't even agree on the problem. You also have to agree on the solution. But conservatives are very very insistent on not providing a solution because they don't care. They just want to use the like big pharma talking points as a wedge to, number one, get lefties potentially on board and suck them into the nozzle vortex, but then also to like legitimize other talking points about, like, I don't know, being anti-vax. Like, that's what they're mainly concerned with.
Because big pharma, do you think, let me ask you, do you think big pharma has only the interest of the public in mind?
Yeah, see, like, look, this is what I'm talking about. Like, whenever something good happens, they get fucking conspiratorial. Like, the lockdowns were good. The vaccine, good. The fact that it costs money, bad. They won't ever criticize the pharmaceutical industry for the, like, insane shit that they do. Like, withholding patents for the vaccine, like, making like, charging people for the vaccine after a certain amount of time, like, gouging people for prescription drugs. Conservatives don't care because they're in the pocket of a lot of moneyed interests. Those are their interests. You know, Dennis Prager is wealthy enough to have those kinds of interests at play for him as well. They will only ever invoke this language when they're talking about something that benefits people. And why they're trying to describe why that's bad is, oh, you really think Big Pharma has the best of intentions when it was, like, forced into a position of doing something that would preserve their bottom line while also being beneficial to society? Like, the exceptional thing here is that something good happened, not that, like, look, I'm waffling a little bit. I don't want to get too sidetracked. Again, it's just very transparent that conservatives don't give a shit because they only bring this shit up when it comes to vaccines that have made the world a fucking, like, livable place at all, and not when it's like, oh, insulin costs a shit ton of money, you know?
I'm a liberal capitalist. I think that big pharma has the interest of making money. The goal is
Yeah.
the FDA and the government to regulate, to make sure that they're adhering to what they're supposed to do. Now, if you want to take the position, that every corporation around the world that would have had plenty of investment in calling this out, by the way, why didn't J&J say that the mRNA vaccines were rigged? If you want to say that every academic institution across the entire world, especially in other countries, weren't calling out the horribleness of the mRNA vaccines, and if you want to make the argument that every country in the world, even those that didn't utilize our vaccines, like China, Russia, Iran, and Qatar, they would have every...
By the way, all of those except for Qatar, I think, we withheld the patents from. Like, we didn't sell them the patents for the vaccine, so they had to either make their own or get it from India or Cuba or something. One of the worst things that came out of the pandemic was the United States' refusal to, like, basically break down the geopolitical barriers a little bit. But anyways. But yeah, you know, Destiny's correct. Like, yeah, obviously, companies in a capitalist system are motivated by making money. That's how that shit works. Like, you don't need to get all
Free
conspiratorial
incentive to
about
say,
it.
By the way, those mRNA vaccines are killing Americans. It's strange that all of these people seem to be silent on this issue, but thank God we've got Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson to tell us about how corrupt, and Brett
Yeah,
Weinstein
true.
to tell us how corrupt, I guess, Big Pharma is. I thought that conservatives used to be proud of large American businesses. This was
You're
an
right, I
operation
was.
under warp
You're
speed from
100%
Donald Trump,
right.
a Donald Trump warp speed, a globalist,
guilty.
capitalist thing that Americans should be proud of, and we can't even take pride in it because you're so conspiracy brained on it now.
True. Okay, he brought up the conspiracy brain bit.
Conspiracy brain, and sometimes they really are. Look, I will admit to you, I defended the big pharma nearly all of my broadcast career. I have been awakened to the corruption. that is-
I have been awakened.
Sorry,
Definitely something that a serious person says ever. It, like, not in jest. Fucking, behold the peak of conservative intellectual capacity.
I think we've been awakened to something called
never
audience
took-
capture. I
never
think
took
audience
Robert
capture is
F.
what we were awakened to.
Yeah.
I never took Robert Kennedy seriously on the issue of vaccines and kids, and now I do. I admit it. I have been chastened by the facts.
The
All
guy
right,
that says
gentlemen,
the polio
listen,
vaccine
I
has
know
killed
that
more
we
people
could
than it's
go-
saved. Yeah. Okay.
We
Sorry.
could go endlessly on vaccines, but we have come to the end of our time. The last thing I want to ask you, and it really should be just a one.
Okay, this will probably be. I'm
Dennis,
gonna
you
quit
first.
now.
Who do you expect
This
to be
race
the
is
winner
done.
of the November election?
Oh boy.
So I feel bad in not giving you a yes or no or a one-person answer.
Trump or Harris?
I never answer predictive questions.
Okay.
I'm only interested in what I think we need to do, and the thought of 4 more years of the left governing the country.
Not the left, liberals. I only wish the left was governing the country. Then some good shit might actually fucking happen, like tax hikes for really fucking rich dickheads, and also maybe some lower prescription drug prices and a single payer system. You know, any of that sort of stuff. Maybe some more incentives for cooperatives to become the primary model of business. Get a little bit more of that worker democracy. You know, that'd be good. But no, we don't get any of that. We get liberals who are obsessed with small businesses and tax cuts for the middle class, and like, granted, do reduce some prescription drug prices sometimes. You know, that's all right.
Frightens me in terms of liberty. So
All right. But you're not making a prediction. Steven, who do you expect to see the win in November?
I'm feeling good on Harris right now.
Feeling good on Harris.
Okay.
Gentlemen, we haven't quite said it all, but we've said a lot of it. Dennis Prager, Stephen Kenneth Destiny Bennell II, thanks to both of you for joining me today.
good to be with you again, David.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Cool. Thoughts on the debate? If I'm being honest, I know this might be harsh to Destiny. Obviously, he performed really well in the debate. He's like, you know, in the sense of, like, Dennis Prager looked pretty dumb the whole time, in a certain way. But again, because Dennis Prager was so transparently dishonest about everything that he said and everything that he supposedly believes, I think, in truth, Destiny lost the debate the moment he agreed to do it. You just can't really engage with conservatives anymore. And you'll get that same rhetoric for any conservative that you talk to. You can ask them, like, any of those questions, and they'll have the same fucking slimy, dishonest answers about, like, oh, January 6th wasn't it. Well, actually, most conservatives will be more openly pro-Jan 6th than Dennis Prager, because they don't have the media training to sort of play coy on it. I guess, you know, I guess I just kind of lost brain cells for fun. I don't know. I guess if I want to highlight some of the ideological divides that were present, I wanted to sort of highlight that from the get-go. I guess I did that sort of in the first half, maybe not so much in the second half, because I was getting tired as it went on. Destiny and Dennis Prager definitely got into the weeds on some of the procedural arguments. On the left, you might get into that a bit as well. But I think one of the big differences was just the fuck, I was so on top of it earlier, and now I'm struggling to, like, bring it back from the beginning. Was just that, like, oh yeah, the sort of capitulation to the right on certain issues of immigration and trans issues and such, where, like, ultimately, I think Destiny had a decent enough take when he was like, "Why do you care so much about this?" But then ultimately had a much more right leaning position on like trans people in sports than I would or whatever. You know, I guess it's just, part of probably the ideological divide is visible in the sort of insularity and self-containedness of that debate. Not in the sense that it was self-contained, but rather there are certain things that didn't really come up, and that is economics. And to me, you cannot have a political discussion that doesn't at any point implicate that. Like it's all well and good for liberals to act the part of the anti-fascist. That's great. But you have to recognize that, as I said earlier, fascists create the mass graves and liberals create the fascists. The sort of liberal capitalist order, the globalization that has led to countries being bled of their standards of living and has led to mass exploitation, led to jobs being outsourced, led to the decline of unions that are only now starting to come back, is the reason for so much of the frustration that liberals are unwilling to incorporate into their political messaging, right? The reason that you have to have this debate in the first place is because of the failures of liberalism. An entire half of that debate is the source of the other half. Fascists do not exist without a liberal system from which they spawn as a reactionary force out of its like systemic failures to sort of deliver on its promises. I feel very Freudian for invoking this, but it's almost like invoking the safety of the womb, that you're like conjuring up this imagined past where the flaws of liberalism and the flaws of a capitalist system had not yet been fully realized or whatever. Obviously not, it's not that coherent from the fascist end. They just want to, they want to put people in internment camps as the thing. I think you have to be, I don't know. You have to be more comprehensive in addressing the issues than just XYZ policy package in Congress. And let's be real, Congress doesn't do jack shit. So, good luck getting them to do anything, even with the Democrats in charge. Yeah. I don't know. Look, I wanted to highlight some of the differences between myself and Destiny and Dennis Prager and whatever. I feel like I've done that at least in part. This shit is draining more so than it used to be, I feel. Or maybe I'm just tired today. Who knows? Yeah. Don't do liberalism. More importantly, don't do fascism. Do socialism. That shit's good. Because, like I said, socialism is sort of the constructive answer to the failures of liberalism. Fascism is the reactionary answer to the failures of liberalism. If you want to amend the systemic flaws of a capitalist system, you have to sort of make it more democratic, empower the workers to have a larger say in the system, in what kind of remuneration they get, in the kinds of production that's happening. Turn businesses into miniature democracies instead of having them be, miniature fascist dictatorships, or miniature monarchies, I guess. Yeah, that's about it, I suppose. This will probably be my last debate review for a long time, like I said. And of course, notably, all three of these people involved in that debate had a very shitty position on the Israel-Palestine conflict, where they're all pro genocide on that front. So notably, that didn't come up, because I don't think they would have much to disagree about. But that wasn't really a component part of the discussion, so I didn't feel the need to comment on it as it was happening. God damn it, I feel like I'm in this state where I always feel like there's something more that I need to say or that I want to say, but I can't quite grasp it. I never quite feel satisfied. Let me rack my brain for a second. Future me, if this is editing, just cut out this like gap where I'm thinking. Yeah, you know what? Here's what I'm going to leave it with. Fascists are so anti-empiricist and so like unintelligent, dishonest, and just like they're a pigeon on a chessboard. How do you even engage with them? You can't by choosing to engage with them at all. As I have done, as Destiny has done, you've kind of lost already because you've stooped yourself to a level of stupidity and retardation that will be as detrimental to your brain as potentially, consuming substances such as alcohol in large quantities. And then also, I think that the scope of that debate was somewhat limited by the fact that it was just a contention between fascism and liberalism, where they talked about the border, they talked about a little bit about trans people and queer people, but on both of those issues, there was a distinct lack of systemic critique, and there was a distinct sort of concession by Destiny to Dennis Prager that I don't think was warranted. I'm sure Destiny would disagree, but that's where I see it as a socialist. And I think that was kind of a running theme through the debate that like, uh, you know, ultimately you're just back at square one through both the stupidity of the fascist and the sort of uh, the the status quo orientation of the liberal. You definitely haven't changed the fascist mind. You haven't introduced anything new to the political discourse either. And that's where I believe socialism is sort of suited to that. Because you do need much more critical engagement with the sort of systems that like Destiny even brought it up at one point that like yeah he recognizes as a business in a capitalist system the objective is to make money, but that can create a lot of contradictions and that can create a lot of the problems that enable fascism to become a prominent force in the first place. And I think that like you have to sort of allude to those elements of like why the fascist exists in the way they do. You have to sort of use that in your arguments against the fascists. Is like, look, ultimately, it can't just be, I guess, between fascism or the circumstances that created fascism, like I said. And that's where I will leave it. So, thanks for tuning in, everybody who decided to tune in this time. Next time, I will not actually be streaming Mario Kart. I will be streaming Minecraft, I think. I promised to do some Minecraft creative mode stuff, so that's what I'll do. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time.